Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
Today we're doing the follow-up with Veronica Moore on the ABCs of MSGs. And at this time, I'm going to let Veronica take it.
So welcome. Today we have ABCs of MSGs, the win-win, and just questions and answers that you guys may have or had from the previous measurable skills gains, part 1 and part 2. I'm Veronica Moore. I am a program specialist with the Texas Workforce Commission under the direction of Mahalia Baldini. And so I just wanted to go over just a couple of things that we covered. So part 1, some of the objectives we covered, changes to the measurable skills gain and the enrollment measures. We talked about the MSG summary chart. So we put out a new format for that summary chart. We also talked about performance guide. Remember, those things are updated for PY 23-24. So if you hadn't looked at it, they are available currently. And then we talked about where do you fit in the puzzle for measurable skills gain attainment. Talked about some professional development, and then we'll talk about the win-win and questions and answers during this session. Just as a recap for part 1, Matt talked about defining measurable skills gains and the policy guidance and understanding what those outcomes were. We talked about the 5 types, any clarification on documentation and how you needed to document that information or measurable skills gains both in teams and in the student files. We also talked about just some examples of MSG context, and then we provided just some reminders for MSG planning on that part 1. As you guys know, and I wanted to also bring this up, last year we had 7 target measures and outcomes. This year we're moving to 9. So in your enrollment target, the changes that you will find is that we're moving from where last year we had total enrollment, IET enrollment, and intensive enrollment. This year, you will have a target for total. You'll have a target for EL Civics enrollment. You'll have a target for IET EL Civics enrollment. And then you'll have a target for IET enrollment as well as intensive enrollment. So the 2 that have been added are your EL Civics enrollment and your IET EL Civics enrollment. You guys have been coding those individuals throughout. What you'll see in this program year is those broken down into their own targets. So move from 7 to 9 as well. Trainings on part 1 and part 2. We had 7 last year. We're back to 9 this year. Remember your enrollment targets and your measurable skills gains. Those are program year based. And then your credentials and your employed enrolled second quarter, employed enrolled second through fourth quarter. Those are exit based measures. Here's the overview of the chart with the 5, really 6 measurable skills gain because type 1 has an A and a B. If you're not familiar with the measurable skills gain overview, and this is a chart which tells you the name of the types of measurable skills gain, which participants may earn this, and just some details so you'll be more familiar about where students may fall when they're earning these gains as well. And I believe I provided a handout of this as well. If not, then I can also send that to Krista and we can put it with the access to the PowerPoint. You could also find this in the communities of practice. So Teacher Tuesday Part 2, we talked about all the information that was in the performance guide. The PY 22-23 performance guide, just remember the 23-24 has a few updates with some of the measures that have changed. We talked about some general reports, MSG management report, your POP report, basically some data management reports, Tableau. Talked a little bit about professional development, and then we talked a little bit about where you fit in. And so today we will continue to talk about where you fit in, the accountability, and the win-win. Just as a reminder, remember that there's 5 types of MSGs. Type 1 has 2, so 6 if you want to count them all in its totality. We do have a post-testing rate of 65%. In the performance guide, tells you about what counts. If you haven't read the current performance guide, it is very important that you look over that because it gives you all the information and really breaks down your measurable skills gains and what can count and what doesn't. We talked about the performance guide, SOPs, the importance of data accuracy, getting things in on time, not only into teams, but to your data entry folks. So if you have sign-in sheets that need to go to them. We talked about monthly performance reports, the I3 reports, and remember that the I3 reports are official data reports. A lot of times we get questions about, this doesn't look the same in Teams as I see on the data reports. Your data reports are your official reports. And depending on if things were changed or people went back and changed data, there are going to be some fluctuations or some differences in those numbers as well. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that a little bit. And then we talked about Teams reports, MSG Management Report, your POP report, and we also have a POP Exeter report. So you are able to have access to that if you have Teams access as a staff. So as we look at helping students reach these outcomes, it's important that we focus on quality. Are the participants getting what they came to us for? Are they coming for HSCs? Are they receiving their HSCs? Are they improving their language skills? Are they receiving their credentials? Are they here for wage increases or other improvements as well? So what we are wanting to do is focus on quality, and a part of that win-win is also focusing on quality. One way to focus on the quality is looking at your comprehensive framework for adult education and literacy service. In order for you to help the students or participants that are coming to you, it's important for you to know what services holistically that your program provides, right? Remember that these are not all inclusive. A lot of people partner with other stakeholders and they may have additional services that AEL isn't allowed to provide with AEL funding, but they collaborate with someone, maybe like on childcare as well, so they may be able to help. So our core services, we talk about basic skills, instruction, digital literacy, financial literacy, transition to post-secondary education. We have our HSC and beyond, your high school equivalency, to post-secondary career exploration. You look at language fluency, which is a lot of our ESLs, our internationally trained professional classes and skilled immigrants. Then we have reentry or corrections services, correctional education. We do reentry and post-release services. So as far as corrections education and post-release services, some programs have them and some programs don't. We have employer engagement and workplace literacy. We have career pathways and integrated education and training. So these are your IETs and your training services. And then you have your workforce preparation activities, meaning working with employers as well. Again, these are not all inclusive. Some of your programs may have more, some may have less, but these are some of the core services that AEL provides, so you're aware. Another part of the win-win or the success of your program is really looking at your program component success. So first, we need to look at the components of success. So that's your staff, your students, your communication, how you communicate, your compliance, and then your evaluation of your program. So for staff and students, it's important to kind of look at the ability to build capacity. And as you guys are providing the students with what they need from comprehensive assessments to staff training and support through transparency of services. So really knowing what services an individual is coming for. And even as an instructor, you're going to be usually the primary contact with that student once they come into the program. So really knowing what your program offers is very important, because then you can be the referral point or the conduit for that student to get to different services. So when you're talking about staff and students, that is your ability to build that capacity with them as well. When you're talking about communication, we're talking about students participating and what they should be aware of and understand about your services. So really communicating and being able to communicate what it is that you provide. And the only way for communication is not only through your students, the transparency, but also through you guys as far as teachers providing feedback to your core or your leadership staff on how things are going within the classroom, the dialogue that you guys have, any clarifications that you're needing as well. And then we're going to talk about compliance. So when we're talking about compliance, there is a major compliance oversight of the AEL program. And so when you're looking at compliance, it's really understanding the performance measures and the entire system, from training to data entry to monitoring and all the other requirements that the program has. You may not be responsible for things specifically, but there may be certain components of compliance that are also tied to you guys as instructors or instructional staff. And then we have evaluation. It is very imperative with the ability to look at programs and make assessments of areas of improvement or change. And I think that as an instructor, you guys are key in that input that's needed because you work with the students on a daily basis. It's also important that as students are progressing, that if you're not the one that is providing the assessment, you're the one that's also needing the results of that assessment in order to help those students or those participants continue to progress through your program, because you have to know what's their next move, what's their next step. So if Veronica comes in and she wants her HSC, I acquire that HSC, then what's going to be my next step? Is it going to be post-secondary transition, or will it be maybe an integrated education and training program within the adult ed system as well? But it's important for you guys to know just generally what services that your program provides. Something to note is that these components are a continuous improvement plan that requires evaluation as early and as often as possible or as needed for improvements. And as you can see, the components are the sum of a whole. And I kind of see our system the same way. We are a circle and we're our chain link fence. So if there's gaps in the link, then we have to find a way to fill those gaps in order to continue to provide those services to our students in a more effective and efficient way. And then it also requires everyone to do their part in making program improvements and building program success. Success should be student-centered. We're all here for the participants and the students. So every part of our system should be student-centered. And I'm not saying like you're totally catering to whatever the student wants, because there's certain things that you can provide and certain things you can't, but really knowing what your services are and how you can help that student progress, which means student success builds program success. So if you're student-centered and they're being successful, then naturally your program is going to follow as long as you have those other components in place. You're communicating, you're working on your compliance aspect as well. And my belief is that the instructors are one of the most important positions within the adult education system, because you have the direct contact with the students and you're putting in the most work when it comes to student success. And then the fully integrated model. So it's kind of important when I talked about the circle and the links that we all play a part in it. We all play a position in it, and everyone has a specific or sometimes multiple positions, right? Maybe I'm playing on offense and defense. I'm an instructor, but I'm also maybe a career navigator. Maybe I'm an instructor, but I'm also a instructional lead for a team. So it's important to look at your fully integrated model from how do we recruit? What does our holistic assessment look like? What does college and career planning or preparation look like? How many students do we have fallen into these areas? And then your integrated education and training. What does the training look like? What can we offer? Is this on the in-demand occupation list based on your participants? And then with your career navigator and your support services, what other support services do you have? AEL can currently offer transportation assistance. You may also collaborate for this. We have HSC voucher programs, which also could be a buy-in for students that are working to get their high school equivalencies. But then your program may partner with other agencies and stakeholders and partners to kind of help build a holistic model for resources and services that your students may need to kind of help them progress through the program. So looking at the Texas Center for the Advancement of Literacy and Learning, which is our TCAL system, an awesome system where you can find resources as well as a performance guide, testing guide. It's on this same website. This will take you to the welcome page, and you'll have a plethora of information and resources for training, the PD portal, and all of that information. So as we're building the success and the win for the programs, it's also important for you to know where you can go to for a training and services and additional resources when maybe you want to enhance certain things. So our main professional development center is TCAL out of Texas A&M. And these are the areas where you can work with them to get the training and some more in-depth understanding of measurable skills gains or teams and all of that stuff as well. There's also their provider directory. So if you have individuals that are looking for resources, maybe you have a student that's moving out of your current provider area into a different area, we do have a provider directory that you can utilize as well. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention. So as students are working toward progress, that we're all connected. So when one person leaves your program and go, say, from Austin to Dallas, it should be the soft handoff. It should be, oh yeah, I can link you to that program because we're all interconnected in some way, shape, or form. The next center for resource is the distance education PDC. So when we're talking about helping students meet outcomes and gains and the win-win, is really utilizing your distance education professional development center. This is both for students and staff, really technology driven, how to educate your students on when they are able to participate in distance learning modules or software. What does that look like? And if they're having issues with that, this is a center that will help both your staff and your students. Please utilize and reach out to your TCAL professional development specialist, and then they will help link you to resources and services in this area as well. And then the next, as far as the win-win, is the Career Pathways Professional Development Center. So when we're looking at career pathways, these are all things career pathways. So you're talking about your intensive services, your IETs, your reentry corrections, your workplace literacies, and your internationally trained professionals. So they have a lot of resources and they have a lot of trainings that they can come and provide or that they can link you to in order to expand not only your knowledge as an instructor or instructional staff, but there's also resources and webinars that they've already completed that are available in the PD portal to kind of help you understand what those career pathways are, what the requirements are of that. So as you are talking to your students, you can inform them or link them to the people that can inform them. So please reach out to your TCAL PD specialist to connect not only to the DEPDC, but also to the Career Pathways Professional Development Center as a resource. So where do we fit in the win-win? As we're looking at the win-win, wanting to look at where you guys fit into the puzzle as far as instructional staff and looking at how you are familiar with different resources and performance and outcomes. So it's really important, even as an instructor, to know what the performance goal and outcomes are, what you're working toward as far as not only helping your students progress either through gains or obtaining their credentials or receiving their measurable skills gains and all of that, but what is the program's overarching goal? Your program will provide contracted areas with basic education, enable them to effectively become literate and obtain the knowledge and skills necessary for employment and economic self-sufficiency. We'll work to help individuals who are wanting to acquire their high school equivalency or secondary diploma. Our program also participates in post-secondary education and training through concurrent or co-enrollment with workforce board programs to include co-enrollment in integrated education and training programs. And then we also enter or advance in employment. So sometimes you have programs that work directly with employers to prepare participants for unsubsidized employment or in-demand industry occupations that lead to self-sufficiency. Ultimately, what we're working for and helping our students get is economic self-sufficiency and building that, whether it's through an IET participation and getting their credentials, whether it's through English language learning, or if it's just a skill upgrade or someone obtaining their high school equivalency, it's going to help them be more economically sufficient. And then we build in all these other services and activities into that will help participants also be more aware, because as you guys know, a part of navigating systems is being aware and understanding what those systems entail and how can I best navigate the system. So we become the information holder to connect students with areas to where maybe if they don't understand how to complete an application or where they go for the food or what training is available and what the requirements are, you become that conduit for that student as well. ultimately establishing the win-win for the student and the win-win for the program. Next is just a seat at the table. Where do you sit at the table? Just in the chat, how many instructors feel like they have a seat at the table? Maybe your program has a suggestion box or an improvement box or somewhere where you can put in your own suggestions. Just generally in the chat, do you feel like you have input at the table? What are you guys utilizing to keep the communication open with the entire team?
You've got 2 people that said sometimes. Yes, we have weekly meetings with our team.
And weekly meetings and having an input is very important because then you get the buy-in on the instructional end as well. But being able to communicate your concerns, your successes, as well as any improvements that you would like to see with the program should also be a part of your seat at the table. And then just as another part of the win-win is your positive outlook. I'm a firm believer that teamwork makes the dream work, and it is important that we look at the team and that we're rowing in the same directions. Also looking at the resources, utilizing the resources that are available to you and your program and your students and sharing those resources. And remember that during the evaluation, it's a continuous improvement plan. It's important to have processes and procedures in place. And it's important to follow those processes and procedures. It's hard to follow something that you don't know what the process or the procedure is, but it's also important to ask, do we have a process for this? Or what's the process for XYZ if I need the student to test early? If you don't already know that or have a way to get that information or that's not shared, really looking at the positive outlooks on that. And then remember that it's important that you celebrate your successes, no matter how small or how big they are, that you celebrate those successes. This can spark motivation and a renewing, not only in your program, your staff, but also in the students. So celebrate the small things as well. And then the data. Remember that the data paints the picture for what your program are doing. So when we're talking about measurable skills gains, there's a process. Your students can be receiving all the measurable skills gains. You could be testing them. They could be receiving credentials. They can be improving and they can have a skills progression. They can be acquiring their high school diplomas. But if that information doesn't show in teams or that's not getting to the data entry folks and that's not getting entered into teams, it does not show us a true picture of what your program is truly doing. And so sometimes you'll find where, you're like, no, I think I have more students that made gains if you're looking at your own data. And it's important if you're not in teams that you can have some type of access to at least see your own students' progress and what they're doing and what they need. And this can help, as far as motivating the students, you're having that direct access because you're working with them on a day-to-day basis and you have that first contact and that best rapport with the students. But remember, if the data is not in teams and it doesn't get to teams, we don't get to see the work that you're truly doing as an instructor. And I know you guys are working hard and you're doing hard work with those students. So some things to remember as we're looking at the win-win. One thing to remember is to ensure that staff have access and that you have read access to your SOPs, understanding the testing, your data management, and just retention and post-service tracking. It's also important to remember that teachers, you are one of the most important positions in the AAL program. You are key in the data process. So really submitting things timely, like student sign-in sheets, is very important to progress testing, because if the sign-in sheets aren't entered timely, then the students have a lag and it becomes a domino effect. So really timely submission of the sign-in sheets is very important for progress testing, also for monitoring, and also for data validation. Although you have data into teams, it's not official until it's validated and our I3 team, our data team, pulls that information out. When we're talking about accuracy and timeliness, also, it's important to get that information in and that it's recorded correctly. So there's no reason that we have to go back and make corrections. So it's important for you as an instructor in the part of this win-win to do your part. If I'm supposed to turn in my sign-in sheets by a certain time frame, sign them and have them turn in by a certain time frame. If not, it puts a lag in the system, which affects your data, which also affects your outcomes, and which affects your program performance. Student hours should be reviewed on a regular basis. This is a key for timely progress testing and avoiding exits. You as an instructor are going to be the first line of defense for that student because you know that student best as far as classroom, if they show up and what kind of work they do, even what problems they may have, because they may be disclosing that to the instructor. If I'm just a testing person that comes in periodically, they may not feel comfortable with disclosing that. Really keeping the students' hours and ensuring that you're keeping the students on track. And if they're having issues or they're having concerns or there's problems, really relaying that to the team that can help them. Maybe they need a planned gap. Maybe they could be tested a certain time because maybe they're leaving and you know that. But really relaying it to the team and the people that need to know it so we can help that student continue their success. And remember that all staff should have reviewed the AEL guide and the testing guide. This is on the TWC website and the TCO website. It is open to anyone that wants to view it, even if it's just a section and you're only responsible for certain things. It also keeps you updated. It keeps you aware of certain things. And these are updated yearly. So if you're looking at wanting to have the latest and greatest, these are just some guides to review. Staff should also be aware of how distance learning and proxy hours can supplement and support student outcomes. So just being aware of your distance learning software that's available that could provide more time on task. Maybe if students are having to miss days or what your attendance requirements are. Do you have a makeup homework or some type of makeup hours for your students? Also utilizing distance learning to increase hours toward testing. And it yields gains. So the research has shown that when you're pairing face-to-face or online learning with distance learning, the modules, students are receiving more hours and they also have the ability to make gains a lot faster. And then remember that distance learning, a part of that win-win is that even the students that are in the distance learning and they're receiving proxy hours, or at some points they're receiving direct hours, that needs to be communicated and those students need to be monitored regularly. It keeps them connected to the program and it keeps them moving forward and toward their goal. As important as it is, it's important that we all work together. Okay. So together we achieve more. That's what the team consists of and that's what it looks like. We are a team. I know that we can't do all of this stuff alone. Nor should we want to do it alone. We should lean on each other to do what we need to do for student success and program success. So lean on your partners, lean on your staff, your students. They're also in it too. They have a buy-in into this as well. And then your coworkers and other community stakeholders, because as a team, together we achieve more. And I wholeheartedly believe that two minds work better than one. And we see things from a different perspective so we can bring our different perspective and experiences into things. Just something to remember as we're working on the win-win. Just remember, we cannot hold a torch to light another's pathway without brightening our own. And it's important that when we're trying to light someone else's path, we also light our own. We pull on their strength and they pull on ours. And then we also work together for that. And this is where we establish the win-win. That's where I'm putting that student first, but I'm also looking at ways that I'm also building my own skill set and then utilizing the resources that you have. Any questions before I move on to just asking you guys some questions about the last two sessions?
I don't see any questions in the chat.
So I will move on to learning and experience, and you can put your answers to these questions in the chat. What is the current post-testing rate set for TWC AEL grantees? 45% A, 65% B, 30% C, and D, 85%. B is correct. It is 65% currently. I will also advise that the post-testing rate across the state has gone up. And remember, the higher number of post-tests you have increases your post-test outcomes and your post-testing rates. So if you're testing more often and more frequently, you'll have a higher post-testing rate. We have a 65% rate currently, but a lot of people are in the 70s and 80s and 90 percentile. So continue to post-test. The more you post-test, the higher your rates are and the increase in your gains as well. Next question. What are the program enrollment targets for PY 23-24? A, total enrollments, B, IET enrollments, C, intensive enrollments, D, EL Civic enrollments, E, IET EL Civics, or F, all of the above. It's all of the above. Remember, we have those new enrollments that were split out in PY 23-24, which were the newly added ones, which were IET, EL Civics, and EL Civics, although you have already been coding those individuals that way in the past. Next question. Where are measurable skills gains or MSGs entered and tracked? A, TWC website, B, PD portal, C, Teams, or D, TikTok? C, you will have all of your tracking for your measurable skills gains in Teams, and that has an extract and it has a summary. Where can you find performance and testing guides? A, you can't. It is not currently available. B, the TWC, AEL, or TCAL website. C, in Teams, or D, Tableau. It is B. The TWC, AEL, TCAL website is where you can find the performance and testing guide, as well as outcome measures for the program year as they're approved by the commissioners. Next question, where can data for your program be found? A, I3 reports, Teams, and Tableau. B, PD portal, Career Navigator meetings. C, TWC website, TCAL website, or D, the library, YouTube, or newspapers. A, I3 reports. Remember, I3 reports are official reports. Teams is data management reports, and Tableau is a data warehouse of enrollments. Next question. The MSG management report provides participant-specific detail data on measurable skills gains. True or false? That is true. And so those are just a couple questions if you attended part 1 and part 2 of the MSGs. Again, if you want to know more about specific MSGs, maybe type 1A or type 1B or type 5, it's important that you utilize that performance guide as it breaks it down, has examples of that. And you can reach out to your TWC program support specialist if you have questions or specifics as well. Then I wanted to leave just some time for questions and answers.
So Mike asks, why are 4 and 5 MSGs so difficult?
Those 4 and 5s, those are tailored to your IETs and your workplace literacies. It's based on how you set up, especially with your IETs. It's how you set up your trainings and what is encompassing in those trainings. So when you say difficulty, I think it just depends on your understanding of how you're setting up the trainings from start to finish. And if there's any interim measurable skills gains that can be acquired while those individuals are in that span of training. So a lot of times it just depends on what your training span looks like and what benchmarks are built in between that. Some of them have benchmarks built in between, others do not. But definitely reach out to your program specialist and the TCAL team if you're wanting to get a deeper dive into specifically how can I build this out. We have the Career Pathways PDC available too to help you look at how to build things out for these in-demand industry occupations, because all of them have to match what's on the board in-demand list, or you have to get that approved through your workforce board. It just depends on how it's built out and how you build things out.
What is the reasoning for not giving a MSG for passing any of the GED test? As of now, a student must pass all 4 tests to obtain an MSG.
It's more of a federal guidelines and their requirement for what measurable skills gains are and are not. We have put comments in with the Department of Education and the feds as far as our opinion about that. And you may see some changes coming to that once they kind of put out their guidance. But we have, and other states mentioned that as well. So I think we're all on the same page, but it's more right now, it's a federal guideline that they do not count individual HSE test obtainment. They count the whole package as that, but hopefully there's some changes coming.
Another question, how does MSG work on post-test? If a student tests on Math D and we move them to Math A for testing, what does it take for them to get a yes on MSG?
It just depends on what the testing publishers' guidelines are. A lot of times it's like a span, and sometimes in one A or one test, I could get a number increase, but I would not receive a gain increase because I have to move from one section to another. It's also important that as you move students from certain tests to certain tests, that you're following the test publisher's guidelines for that testing. Because depending on where they came in and they baseline will also depend on what that increase is and what it looks like. But that's more the test publisher's requirements and information in the testing guide. We do have a chart on what the gain will be if they move from one section or one area to another. And that's why it's important for test proctors to make sure they have the updated training through TCAL with that, because it's more of a test publisher's requirement on how students move from one level to the next as well, on that. So I definitely would reach out to TCAL. And Tracy, do you have any kind of input in that? I know you do a lot of the TOTs for the different assessments on that.
Right. And I would just put in the chat that if a student baselined on level D, they should be post-tested on level D. And I'm assuming you're talking about TABE 1112. And oops, I put the wrong version in there. And so it would be like giving them the version 11, if you pre-test with 11, and 12 for the post on level D. Unless they topped out on level D at the baseline, then you can move them up. But yeah, sorry about that. This morning I was thinking about TABE will be coming out with versions 13 and 14, but it won't be this program year, so nobody screamed yet. I was glad to know that. But anyhow, yeah, you shouldn't just be moving them up to level A thinking they're going to get a gain, because they won't show a gain if their scale score is still in level D. You want to post-test them on what they were pre-tested on, that level. I hope that made sense.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, that's what the publisher says, and that's what we should follow.
And then there was
Great
another question here that, and I'm not sure exactly, Anna, what you are referring to. She says, what about a student with disabilities with accommodations? Are you talking about the GED or TABE test or which? And Anna, if you want to unmute, that's fine. Okay, the GED. So I would go ahead, Veronica.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So for the GED, they have, and if you have the testing centers have accommodations in the testing centers for GED and their connection to the testing centers. They have their own accommodations that you could refer when you're referring students that you want to make them aware of as well. We do not control that as at the state level. That is a testing center requirement. So the testing center is going to be the one that you want to communicate with and get additional information on what accommodations they have for students that may have certain disabilities or certain requirements as well. So as you're setting students up to take those tests, really reaching out to those testing centers on their requirements, and it may look different depending on what those centers provide or able to provide, and the staffing as well. But I would definitely reach out to the testing centers where you're sending those students to kind of get a general update of what their accommodations currently are. And I hope that answers your question.
We have about 2 more minutes left. Crystal Martinez says, I thought we provide unlimited time on the testing on TABE. Again, referring
that
to the
was on
testing guide.
That was on the accommodations question.
You're talking about TABE when the proctors, the AEL proctors implement TABE?
Yes, I have had students that needed accommodations and their time limit was taken away on their TABE post testing. If I'm answering that Anna's question, if that was the TABE testing or the GED testing, I'm not sure.
I think she mentioned GED.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. The GED testing is what I was referring to.
And so on the GED testing, that would be more of the testing center's requirement and reaching out to them. So you can inform the students and understand the process. The program can understand the process for those accommodations. On TABE, Tracy, that has to do with the test publishers' requirements and what they allow as
Right.
well.
And if a student has documentation, you follow that recommendation of documentation that they bring in. And so if it's unlimited time, that's what you would do. If it's double time, I've never seen unlimited time. I used to do accommodation testing, but if it's double time, then you follow that recommendation to do the TABE. Hope that makes sense.
Some great questions. Any other questions?
All right, we are right at 1 o'clock.
Well, thank you. I just want to let you guys know, as far as instructors, you guys, you have this. You've been doing you're well versed at your craft. So continue to do a good job. You guys do a wonderful job with your students. Continue to ask great questions. And then reach out to us if you need anything. I'm Veronica Moore, program special here with TWC. Each program has their own program specialist assigned. So please reach out to your program specialist if you have additional questions. And thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Veronica. And go ahead and go to your next slide, which is, there we go. We've got to fix that one slide. So please make sure you evaluate the session. The next Teacher Tuesday will be September 12th, and it'll be on the distance learning content standards. So yay. So we'll see you next month.
See you next time. And you guys, it is National, Tracy advised, National Happiness Happens Day. So be impeccable with your words and be happy, and take care of yourselves and stay cool because it's hot out there. Make sure you drink your water and you're staying cool. Hydrate. And thank you guys for joining.
Thank you, Veronica, very much. All right, I am going to close the room. Appreciate it, Veronica, and take care.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Have a great one.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCall continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.